Welcome to ITech Study Work. Last session, we have discussed MVC2 architecture with the front controller. I hope you got a clear crystal clarity about this topic. How to flow is going on in this design pattern. Also, I given one points one by one. Request is go front controller, then front controller delegate the request appropriate handler method, then handler method delegates and the result handler method classes use the service DO. This one is use the service class and DO class. All the things in there. I hope you if you okay, one time. So now remember one thing, front controller is nothing but this is the spatial component. This is the spatial component, the servlet. Okay, it takes the multiple request or all requests. Okay. Okay, so it's called the front controller. Generally, it takes servlet component as a front controller. So we called as the front controller. That's why front controller tap the all request and apply the common system services and delegate the request to the handler classes. And then next further process are there. So request processing take the result from the handler classes. Request processing and then takes the result from the handler classes result to the view component from formatting the result and send the result to the browser window as a response. This is the so now only the slash will do all these things. Okay, to make the front controller trapping and taking either all requests or multiple requests, we need to configure or map them with the slash URL pattern or extension match or directory match. These two match are there. First match is the extension and second match is the directory match are there. Okay. So now extension match URL pattern to trap multiple requests. Okay. This one. So now this is the difference between front controller and handler classes are there. So now front controller generally the servlet component filters. Okay. Like controller handler class is the Spring Bean class and Spring MVC. Okay. And front controller request multiple request and supply like applies the common system services. Okay. And then controller either directly contains the request processing logic or contains the logic to delegate the request to the service classes. Okay. It is possibilities are there. The handler classes contain the business logic, like processing logic. If we are not containing any service logic, then there's delegate the service logic to the model component. So this is the point. So now next is front controller generally managed by servlet container. Okay, of the web application, like normal web application. Okay, managed by the JVM web server. Okay, but managed IOC container of the Spring in the Spring MVC. And controller get the request response object that create and given by the servlet container. But here, as a controller or handler class, it get the request and response that are the passed by the front controller. Those request or response passed by the controller, then handler or controller classes will take. Okay. So now front controller main method containing logic or servlet lifecycle method. Front controller is main method containing logic of the servlet lifecycle. But controller and handler classes method that contain a business logic. This class, and this component contains only what is that business logic or delegation logics are called handler method or called delegation logic called handling method. Front controller one per entire application. Front controller is the one per the entire application. Suppose this is the one application, guys. Okay, this is the one application. Then here observe front controller is one, but here is the handler classes. This is the one per module. Okay. So now this is the to take front controller request, trapping the multiple requests, take the support, extension match, a directory match, or URL pattern like dots. This is the nothing but extension directory match pattern, and this is the directory. Okay. Okay. Now this is the explanation about the diagram. So first we'll do the browser. Browser gives the request to where? Front controller. Then front controller servlet traps the request. Then front controller traps the request and applies common system services. Okay, common system service. Then front controller delegate the request to appropriate handler method by using this dot ds, by using dot ds URL pattern or ds URL pattern. Then front controller delegate the request to the appropriate handler or controller classes, guys. Okay. Now in 5 and 6, 4, 5, 6, these 4, 5, 6 requests are like points are numbers. Handler classes use service. Handler classes use service DO. DO is nothing but data access object and database software to process the request by using business logic and persistence logic. These three steps, these three components take the request and process the request by combining business logic like persistence logic or business logic. Okay, after that, these three, 7 and 8 step, handler classes get the result to business execution from service or DO classes. Okay. So now handler class keeps the result in where? Handler class keeps the result. Those which result is come from like these parts, then handler class is the responsibility to keep in the request scope. And then this is the request scope and this result and send back to the one copy send back to the front controller. The ninth step, front controller delegate to appropriate view component. Okay, for the formatting purpose. View component read the then this component read the result from the request scope. Where read the result from the request scope and format the result. Okay, and the 12 and 13 is formatted result goes to browser as the response through front controller component. So this is our last class. I hope you got clarity. Now today's it's time is possible. Then I will discuss more detailed and more internal parts. So this is also theory part, guys. Okay. So now this, if you are learning anything, if you are learning Spring Boot, MVC or Spring, then theory is the important. Practical is the important for the practice purpose. You should aware about the internals. It's your responsibility in an interview point of view. If you're showing gap as an experience, if you are experienced person, then you should aware about these things. Okay. If you are fresher, then it's okay, not a issue. Okay. You added these things in your resume, then it's added advantage to you. Okay. So now today's topic is what is the dispatcher servlet. So now point. So here one conclusion will come. We will get one conclusion. What is the conclusion is? Front controller is nothing but a dispatcher servlet. What is that? Session. Today's session is 4. Color is good, not an issue. Just in case. Okay. So now today's topic, or you can say, I can say. So now I get one conclusion. What is the conclusion? Conclusion in write it. Okay. If it is possible, write along with me, guys. Okay, all points. So you can see here. Here is front controller as the work as a dispatcher servlet. Okay, front controller is nothing but a here in the Spring MVC. This is the dispatcher servlet. Spring MVC Spring MVC, Spring Boot MVC, sorry. Spring Boot MVC, Spring Boot MVC application, the front controller, the front controller is nothing but what is the dispatcher servlet. Dispatcher servlet. Okay. Dispatcher servlet. Servlet, which is nothing but a predefined servlet component, which is nothing but a predefined servlet component. This is the predefined component inside the Spring Boot MVC. We should not require to develop separate dispatcher servlet. Okay. And also configuration is already takes care by the like Spring Boot. Also, this point is coming in my mind. How Spring Boot configure the dispatcher servlet automatically? How the internal points are there? Okay, some classes, some internals on a startup methods are there. The on a startup method having implementation to work on the like dynamic registration are there. So now write it, guys. Okay. In in every servlet component like either like predefined like predefined like predefined or user defined predefined or user defined user defined user defined must be configured now configured must be configured with servlet container must be configured with servlet container like about the class details and all the things. Two, like class detail must be given by given to where given to servlet container servlet container given to servlet container and also must be must be mapped or mapped or slash linking with URL pattern either either slash slash or with the directory match with the directory match extension directory match extension directory match extension. So now this is the responsibility the programmer should predefine anything is there like so configure with the servlet container for giving the class detail to the where servlet component. But here, when Spring Boot MVC, there is a no user-defined configuration and that it's doing automatically all these things. This is the beautiful things. So programmer not need to do configuration like servlet configuration and URL/URL pattern configuration. All these things not provide. Okay, so it will do automatically. So now here we have three ways. We have three ways to configure servlet container. Configure servlet configuration with. We have three ways to configure servlet to servlet container. We have three ways. First way is the declarative approach. Second, with the annotation, with annotation driven approach like at the rate web servlet kind of thing. And declarative approach, nothing but in Spring MVC, I have teaching in Spring MVC. I have teaching like right now. Right now is I am teaching like the declarative approach. Okay, right now I'm teaching declarative approach in the Spring MVC batch. So now, but here is the no XML are there, guys. So XML total remove in this part like Spring MVC, Spring Boot MVC. So now here three ways we have. First one is the declarative approach. Second one, the annotation driven approach. And third one, this is the very important programmatic approach. You can also call this one is the dynamic registration. It will do when you start the server and deploy your application on the server space. Then it will start registration automatically. So this is do by the this process done by the Spring Boot. Okay. I will give if time is possible. If time is possible, I will give process all the process where it go and what all these things it will do. All I will give you. Okay. So now we have three ways. We have three ways. We have three ways. We have three way to servlet configuration. Servlet configuration to servlet configuration. Servlet configuration. We have three way to servlet three way of this one. Na? Servlet configuration. Servlet configuration, which is the servlet container. Container. Okay. We have three ways. Now here, first way is what is that? First way is the declarative approach. Declarative approach means provide the XML file. Okay. Approach is nothing but the provide using what is that? Web.xml file. XML file in your project. Okay. So now this is useful. This approach is useful if the servlet component is ready-made. The servlet component is ready-made component and XML configuration are allowed in application. So write it where this is the useful guide. Useful if the servlet component is ready-made, if the servlet component is ready-made servlet component and XML configurations. XML configuration are allowed in application. Configuration are allowed in application. Then this is the useful process. Like example, dispatcher servlet, dispatcher servlet, dispatcher servlet, dispatcher servlet, dispatcher servlet configuration in XML, configuration in XML driven Spring MVC application. Spring MVC application in XML plus annotation XML plus annotation driven application. Driven application. If in your application both is active, both the active, like XML is possible and annotation is also possible, then this approach is useful. XML driven approach. This one is a very useful approach. Okay. When we learn Spring security, then XML is a very important part. Okay. All the configuration are provided by the web.xml file in the XML file. Okay. So now dispatcher servlet is the predefined component. Okay. So now in the Spring MVC XML driven application, so XML file is allowed in the Spring MVC application. And also web.xml file is allowed when you develop annotation driven application. When you develop like annotation driven application by using @web servlet, then this approach is not useful. Okay. So now where this approach is useful, like in the application, if it's possible, web.xml file is allowed, then this approach is useful. Now next is next one is the annotation driven approach by using what is that, at the rate of web servlet at the rate of web servlet. So now where this approach is useful, guys, where this approach is useful, listen, useful where servlet component is the user-defined server component. User-defined servlet component. There is the approach is useful. Okay. 100%. Like first. Okay. So now useful if the servlet component is user defined. What is that? User defined, not a predefined component. User defined servlet component. There this approach is useful. Like example. The example is while developing servlet or GSP based while developing servlet GSP based model 1 and MVC 1, MVC 2 architecture. MVC 2 architecture web application or while developing user defined front controller. User-defined front controllers. Now, there is this approach is useful. Where useful if the servlet component is user-defined component. Okay, like if you are developing simple application by using servlet and JSP and use one model architecture like MVC1, whatever you want, you are using, and then use this approach. Okay, annotation based by using this. Now, third is the very important. What is the third? programmatic approach. Using nothing but using SC is servlet contact SC dot add a servlet. Add servlet is the some parameter like request response kind of thing there. Okay, method. This is the approach is the dynamic registration. Also called this approach is also called as dynamic registration. It means dynamic registration. It done by the automatically by that. Here is servlet company. Here is the nothing but servlet context. Servlet context. Okay. Servlet context. Now here. Now this approach is very useful in the Spring Boot MVC. Okay, and also this approach is full the 100% driven code driven application. Here is no XML file is existed. Totally XML file will be removed. Okay, so this approach is called programmatic approach and also dynamic registration. It will do and Spring Boot MVC it will do automatically by some internals. Okay, by using on startup method. By using on startup method is one method is there. In this time is today's time is possible. I will introduce this topic also. Okay. So now useful, write it useful to configure predefined servlet component predefine servlet component in the component servlet component in the web application where also I will show you the practical, don't worry. Also XML configuration where XML configuration are not allowed. Where there is XML configuration are not allowed, then this approach is useful. Now example is in 100% is the is given by this statement given by the Spring MVC owners, Spring MVC company like Interface 21 or Pivotal company give the 100% code driven. Okay, 100% code driven. Also, I will show you in the documentation. If you read the documentation, then you will get this statement 100% code driven. Okay, so this is not my another approach. So 100% code driven. This is given by the officially by the Spring people. Okay, so Spring MVC. So Spring MVC added Spring MVC application. Spring MVC application in Spring Boot or Spring Boot MVC application. Then XML configuration are not allowed. So to configure the predefined dispatcher servlet. Predefined dispatcher servlet component. This programmatic approach. Now, write it. This programmatic approach approach. This programmatic approach will be either directly directly or manually done by whose programmer or internally done by and indirectly done by internally internally. This approach done by internally. Okay. This approach done by the internally. In Spring Boot MVC done by the internally. Okay. So now this is the total part about the programmatic and declarative approach. I hope you got clarity about this topic. If you have still any doubt, just comment in the comment box. If I will give an answer here, okay? I will give an answer, don't worry. So now next point is, next topic is, next point, up to that is good. Up to that is good. Okay. So now here we have, what is that? We have 4 ways. 4 way, what is that way? 4 way or 4 approaches to develop a Spring MVC application. We have 4 ways. Anyone know the 4 ways? Please comment in the comment box. Otherwise, watch the video till end, then you will get clear crystal clarity. Okay. So now declarative approach. First one is the declarative approach by using what? XML driven configuration. Okay. Second one is the same thing is the okay annotation configuration approach. These annotation configuration approach, then you should use what is that? Use the XML file. Why? To active the annotation. So one tag is there, annotation activation tag is there. Okay. So that tag should configure in the web.xml file. Then annotation will active. That's why here the configuration is there. Okay. Now 100% code driven approach. Here is a not required any XML file. Okay, to develop. And third and last one is this is the our topic, Spring Boot MVC approach. Spring Boot MVC approach. Okay, this is the approach to develop a Spring MVC application. So so four different approaches of developing Spring MVC application. That is good, no? Okay. So first approach is what is that? Declarative approach. I will not teach declarative approach, and also 100% code driven is not. We use Spring Boot MVC approach. Okay. So now declarative approach. Declarative configuration approach. This is nothing but XML driven XML approach and file approach. XML driven configuration. Okay. copy this, paste this, and here is annotation. Annotation. Here is number second is annotation. Annotation configuration approach. Here the configuration driven plus annotation driven. Annotation driven configuration. Annotation driven configuration. Okay. Test it. And this is one. This is the one. This is nothing but this is one. This is 100%. This is 100% code driven. This is 100% code driven configuration driven, not driver. Configuration. Okay, driven configuration approach. Okay. So here is the not XML, only Java code is there. Delete 3. And fourth is Spring. This is our code, Spring Boot MVC approach. We use what is that approach? This one. We use this one approach. This approach we used. Okay. So now here, first and second approach. Second approach called dispatcher servlet will configure using web.xml. In this two approach, dispatcher servlet will be configured using what is that? Using web.xml file or called declarative approach. Okay. And third and fourth approach. Third and fourth approach is in this two approach, dispatcher servlet in these two approach, dispatcher servlet will be configured using what? Which approach? Dynamic servlet registration, dynamic, otherwise write it. Dynamic or programmatic. Programmatic is good, na? Programmatic or dynamic servlet registration. Okay. These two approaches we have. This is all about this two point. Changing the color for that. Okay. So now our node point is there. So don't think node point is, guys. What is the node point is? Node point is here is the dynamic registration. One point is the directly approach. The node point is dispatcher servlet, like predefined dispatcher servlet. It does not contain at the rate of web servlet annotation. It does not contain. So now this is the question. If at the rate of web servlet annotation does not contain, then how it will configure automatically with the Spring Boot files like handler, like dispatcher servlet, how to configure all these things. This will do the internally. It is the internal part of it. So now, my point is in the source of in the source of predefined, the source of predefined, in the source of predefined dispatcher servlet is in this process servlet component does not contains web servlet annotation. Annotation. This does not contain. This is the important point. On this point, the question will rise how the servlet configuration is happening internally. Don't worry, I will teach the internal part. Okay. And so now our next point is our what is that? Next point is in Spring MVC or Spring Boot MVC application, we need to use following two annotation. We need to use following two annotation in the Spring or Spring Boot like Spring Boot MVC, and we develop annotation when we develop 100% code driven or 100% code driven or like dynamic servlet registration, like fourth approach, Spring Boot. So now write it in now in Spring Boot MVC or Spring MVC, whatever, Spring Boot MVC application, we need to use following, we need to use the following two annotation. What is the two annotation? Control and request mapping. At the rate controller and at the rate request mapping. So what is that? I will tell you. The following two annotation. This is the mandatory, okay? Annotation. Annotation while developing handler or controller classes. Handler classes or controller classes. Okay. So now first is at the rate controller. What is this annotation? So write it back. This is the important annotation to make the Java class as a controller of handler class. This annotation to make, if you declare the top of the class, like top of the class, this annotation, then this annotation then will do the that class like controller or that class acting like a controller class or handler class. To write it in name to make Java class as Spring, Java class as Spring, what is that? As Spring Wing comes 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 to controller controller or handler classes. So now second annotation is mapping. Request mapping. This request traps the request now. This mapping providing the slash. So now this is an approach to controller class and the handler method having the request path. Controller class having the request path and request mode. Okay. To make to make to make Java method of at the rate controller controller, the controller class as handler method having request path, handler method having request path and and what is that? And request mode and request mode. What is the mode? What is the mode? Mode like get mode and post. To make this annotation will do to make Java method of the controller class as handler method. Okay, as the handler method having the request having the request path. What is that? This request mapping having the request path and request mode. Both these, both these we can declare by using this annotation, both what is the request path as well as mode also. So how we can declare, I will show you. So now suppose this is our public class. Suppose this is our controller class. This is test controller. Suppose test controller is there. Not a test. Employee controller, no? Employee controller. Employee controller. Okay. So now here some logics are there. Okay. And here even method is there. Public string add employee. One method is there, add employee. Some parameters are there, like parameter, provide the parameter. Okay. Provide the parameter, some parameters here is required. Some parameter inside the method, provide the implementation. Provide zero. Now here, because I press the tab button. When you press tab button, then in the MS Paint we cannot write. Okay, so now here, provide some logics, some dummy logic, just something like this. Okay. So now this one. Okay, here in the top of here provide the at the rate controller. So this class acting as the controller. This class acting as the which controller? This class acting like a controller class. So now when you declare this annotation on top of the class, then class to make Java class string. This is the normal up to before the declaration at the rate annotation. This is the normal string class. Suppose this is the normal string bean class. When we specified the when I specified the at the rate controller, then this controller become what is that? This controller become is nothing but a handler or this controller is become the handler or wait a minute, 1 minute. I got a call somewhere, so please wait. So now here, when you declare this at the rate controller on the top of the class, then class will become handler. Class will become handler or controller class. Okay. So now when you declare like these annotations at the rate request mapping. At the rate request mapping, this this annotation. Inside this, we provide the value. Value is the URL pattern. URL pattern. Suppose here, just add, pass the add as the URL pattern and comma here method. Method equals to request. Method equals to request method dot request method dot method dot post. The post request method post. Okay. So now here this will become this is the implementation, guys. This is the total implementation. So now write at some point with clarity and the theory point. Okay. This is the handler method. This is the handler method. Okay. This one is nothing. What is it? The handler method. This one is the handler method. This one the handle method, and this is the controller class. This is the controller class. This is the handler method. This is the controller class. Okay. So handler method in the handler method we have multiple signature is the flexible, not required to. We can change the return type also. We can change here. We can change here like parameter as well as. Okay. What is that? All this point I am writing, so we'll get clarity about this. So now point is, so note is note point is handler methods handler method in controller classes and can have flexible, can have flexible signature. Signature in the sense a name, return type, parameters, flexible signature. That is we can that means we can we have sorry we have multiple options for return type multiple options for the return types and as well as and multiple option all this point. When I start practical, first I will show you the handler method handler methods flexibility I will show you. And second, the request parameters, request at the rate, request mapping, request get mapping, get posting, and all this point I will show you all. So now request multiple options. Multiple options for what is the parameter. We can pass multiple options, not a multiple parameter. Just try to understand. Here is the point. Multiple here is we have multiple option. Multiple option to pass parameters. Okay. So now parameter types, and also method name. Programmer chooses. Here I declare add employee. It's your choice. You can declare add, delete, update, whatever you want. You can declare. Okay. All this point I will show you when I will start programming. Okay. So programmer choice. That's it. This is the total programmer choice, guys. Important note point is. So now next is I am giving the Possible parameter types. Possible parameter types, we can pass how many parameters. As of my knowledge, I'm giving when I start practical. As I'm when I will start practicals, then I will show more and more things. Okay. So now the possible parameter types for parameter types for what is that handler methods. So first parameter. Oh, so now first parameter we can pass the servlet request and servlet response. These exist java dot servlet dot java x dot servlet dot request servlet request request parameter. We can pass servlet request parameter inside that. Okay, servlet request parameter. And the second one is the java dot same thing. Yes. Why the number is so okay. Number two, this is the parameter. Okay. So request response right. Now third one is the here at the rate param. We can pass at the rate param at the rate param will do like bind the data from the view component. Okay. I will use at the rate what is that? Not at the rate param, guys. At the request param, na? At the rate request param. Okay, request. At the rate request param. At the rate request param. Then fourth one is at the rate request header. At the rate request header. Next one, fifth possible parameter cookie cookie view cookie view cookie value not a view cookie value. And this is the very important, this one is the very important. What is that? This one, at the rate model attribute when performing when we use servlet like JSP and spring provided tags in a view component. So there this will be useful. Okay. Model attribute model attribute. Now next one is sixth one is what is that? Seventh parameter is what is that? Winding result. Winding result. Winding result. And eighth parameter is what is that? Eighth parameter is session attribute. This is the also important session attribute. And ninth is the request attribute. Request at the rate. Here is the at the rate. Request attribute. So now these are parameters we can pass. These are the parameter, 9 number of parameter we can pass inside the we can pass inside this. So we can pass these parameter inside the handler method parameter. Okay. Now next is possible. Next one is the possible return type of the handler method. How many possible return type is inside the handler method? So now write it. Possible return type of for return type for return types return types of handler method. So now first return type is string. We can pass string as the return value. Okay. Now second is map. Second is map. Very, very important. Map is the actually used frequently map. Map provide the flexibility and string. Both these two things is the very good. Okay. NE. Okay, map and view. Also view. We can pass view. Okay. And fourth is at the rate of model, a model object, model and view object we can pass, and void also, not a view. Okay, void, guys, void instead of void. Okay, so these four parameters are sorry, not a parameter. These four return type. Up to that, this four return type is possible. Okay. Okay. View is ready. Okay. Fifth point. Fifth is fifth is what is that? Fifth is wide is also possible. Okay. So these parameters are possible for the return type. String is possible, map is possible, view is possible, and model and view also possible, and void is also possible. In Spring MVC batch, I am teaching model and view object as a return type and also as well as also parameters. Okay. So now so this is total all about, guys. This is total all about today's session. So this is, I hope you got crystal clarity about this session 4. What is the Spring Boot MVC front controller is nothing but in a Spring MVC front controller is the dispatcher servlet and straps all request by using slash. Okay, we can declare by using 3 ways. What is the first way is we can configure configuration with the servlet container by using 3 approaches: declarative approach, annotation approach, programmatic approach. These are things. And fourth one is four ways to then the next point is 4 way to develop Spring MVC application. First is this one, and we will use this. We will use our course is this Spring Boot MVC. Okay, this is the fourth approach I will use. So I am preparing the background for the fourth. Okay, so now today's session is very, very important. Today I will discuss how configure all these points, all these things dynamically. all these things dynamically. Why? Because this is the dynamic registration. No? This is dynamic. So thank you. We will meet next session. And do like the video if you like, really like. Okay, thank you. Thank you. We will meet next session.